In this comparative study, I will be analyzing the changes in the war genre with two American films, Full Metal Jacket directed by Stanley Kubrick in 1987 and The Hurt Locker directed by Catherine Bigelow in 2008. The purpose of the study is to investigate how the war genre has developed as American attitude towards war has shifted from the 1960s through the 80s to the 21st century. Full Metal Jacket introduces the anti-war sentiment from the Vietnam War, which was a divisive time in American history. The Hurt Locker presents the shocked early 2000s America as a result of the 9/11 terrorist attacks, which prompted public opinion to support military action against the perpetrators. Full Metal Jacket follows the story of James T. Davis, labeled as Private Joker, who was drafted into the Marine Corps to fight in Vietnam, which slowly deteriorates his mental health through the deployment. In the Hurt Locker, a group of American EOD specialists led by Sergeant Sanborn integrates a new member named Sergeant James to their team, following the death of their original bomb diffuser, Staff Sergeant Thompson, as they are sent on missions in Iraq. As Bernard Beck describes the film containing quick pacing, disorienting cinematography, and tough dialogue to intensify the experience of a story that is brutal to begin with. Relevant film techniques of both Full Metal Jacket and The Hurt Locker will be analyzed. The war genre is known for its depiction of events on the battlefield, often acknowledging the horror and heartbreak of war. Film techniques in the war genre include close-ups of violence, extreme long shots of the battlefield, and loose framing. Struggle and sacrifice are common themes in the war genre, where they are presented in combination with personal heroism and bonding. Themes and film techniques developed from the socio-political and historical context of the film's time periods will be addressed. A similarity between both films is the introduction of soldiers in barracks, conveying the bonding themes of the war genre. Both films utilize barracks scenes to serve as an intermission between the action of war and the development of characters. In Full Metal Jacket, the barracks scene introduces the atmosphere of the 1960s through the racist dialogue of a Marine. The rest of the platoon acknowledges his statement as a joke. However, another Marine reacts in a hostile manner, deeming the comment as unacceptable. The Marines are able to regain their unity regardless of the joke, since they are then attacked by enemy troops, communicating the bonding regardless of the troubles within the platoon. This minor event represents the cultural context of the film's time period, where the 1960s saw the decrease in racism due to the civil rights movement and the integration of white Americans and minorities in the armed forces, which was adapted in the Korean War. On the other hand, The Hurt Locker presents a barracks scene where a soldier is seen playing video games while speaking to another troop. In their conversation, the soldier expresses how he is paranoid of being killed in action and recalls the death of Sergeant Thompson. The second soldier confronts him by scolding in order to fix his attitude. Following this scene, Sergeant James appears walking to his barracks where he encounters Sanborn in the restroom. During the altercation, Sanborn indirectly denounces James' careless behavior and overly confident attitude through a racial stereotype of white Americans. The purpose of the comment directed towards Sergeant James is to provide a warning towards his daredevil personality in the EOD group, since Sanborn has already witnessed the death of a close member. Both these scenes introduce the bonding theme common in war films, since the two encounters between soldiers allow for a sense of brotherhood to develop among them. However, the presentation of this theme is distinct from Full Metal Jacket, since the scolding and insults in The Hurt Locker serve to rectify behavior, and Sanborn's insult is not meant to wound, unlike in Full Metal Jacket, where the insulting joke reflects the racism of the 60s. With distinct presentations of bondage among characters, the differences between the cultural context of both films can be seen, since Full Metal Jacket reveals the racism African Americans and other minorities endured in American society during the 60s, while The Hurt Locker introduces the unity through compassion and the outrage of a post-9/11 America, with further fear of losing other close friends or family. Depiction of violence through the film technique of extreme long shots are common ground both films present through ambushing sniper scenes. Full Metal Jacket sniper scene begins by creating tension among the audience through an extreme long shot from the perspective of a Viet Cong sniper, viewing the investigating Marine, who is named 8-Ball, where he is then wounded critically by the sniper. A close-up shot in combination with slow motion emphasizes the gore of 8-Ball's injuries, which are intended to shock the audience and establish a sense of helplessness, since the accompanying Marines cannot identify the sniper's position. Following this event, another Marine falls into the sniper's ambush and is also shot, where once again the speed of the film slows down with a close-up. The The violence and death in the scene portrays the Marines with a disadvantage, communicating the anti-war sentiment and the socio-political factors within the cultural context of the film's time period, where the Vietnam War was viewed as a pointless conflict that only resulted in casualties. The Hurt Locker, a completely different message is conveyed with the sniper ambush scene. It begins with the main characters meeting with a group of mercenaries in the deserts of Iraq who have captured two insurgents. An unexpected bullet fatally wounds a mercenary, leading to the soldiers to mobilize in battle positions. Unlike Full Metal Jacket, the death of the mercenary is quick and serves for shock value rather than to convey sympathetic sentiment. A sense of heroism is then presented since the attackers are countered by Sanborn when he obtains a sniper rifle originally belonging to one of the mercenaries who was killed by the ambush. Extreme long shots of the battlefield convey the vastness of the terrain where the soldiers are depicted having an equal fight. In addition, Sanborn's successful retaliation conveys hope and victory, revealing the cultural context of the film's time period, since the early stages of the war in Iraq were met with American victory, which attracted support from the American public. In 2009, following the election of Barack Obama a year earlier, the war in Iraq expanded with public support remaining high from the previous administration. The Heartbreak of War is a convention from the genre that is presented with civilians in both films, but in distinct forms. In Full Metal Jacket, the death of the platoon leader, Cowboy, by the sniper's fire heavily demoralizes the main character, Joker, which leads to a search of the attacker. Once the sniper is found and critically wounded by a Marine, it is discovered that the attacker is a teenage girl, in which the rest of the platoon surrounds her. The Vietnamese girl utters faintly for the Marines to end her suffering, leading to the new platoon leader asking Joker to demonstrate his ability to kill by ordering him to shoot the girl. Joker raises his pistol, and through a close-up, Joker's hesitation is viewed. However, out of pressure from the platoon leader, he finally fires his pistol, killing the girl. The camera position remains as a close-up, where the platoon leader is heard off-frame, praising Joker's action. His remorseful facial expression remains until the end of the scene, communicating how Joker never intended to shoot the girl, but was forced to. The Heartbreak of War is depicted through the plot and actions of characters, since the enemy sniper was found to be a teenage girl who may have been forced to fight, representing how war affects the civilian population, resulting in her death at the hands of the film's main characters. This addresses the socio-political factors of the film's cultural context, since the Vietnam War also became a conflict in which the American population was exposed to the brutality of war through television and images of civilians being affected in the conflict. The Hurt Locker's presentation of heartbreak also includes a civilian. However, instead of the main characters attempting to kill, they instead try to help. This begins with an Iraqi man approaching the American soldiers, asking them to remove the suicide vest which has been attached to him by insurgents. Sanborn argues to Sergeant James that they are out of time. However, Sergeant James insists that he may still have a chance to save the man and orders Sanborn to run to safety. Sergeant James attempts to remove the vest but is unable to, as a result of the amount of locks the vest contains. His facial expression reveals sorrow upon becoming aware of the grim situation, which is that he cannot save the man's life and must instead run to save himself from the explosion. The camera switches from a close-up of Sergeant James turning away from the Iraqi man to a low angle of him running to safety, which is reminiscent of the beginning scene, where Sergeant Thompson ran too late and was killed from the explosion. Although Full Metal Jacket also deploys a civilian in the plot to acknowledge the heartbreak of war, The Hurt Locker portrays the soldiers as heroes who attempted everything possible to save an innocent person's life, rather than a group of soldiers debating whether to let an enemy civilian soldier suffer. Furthermore, The Hurt Locker emphasizes the compassion of the soldiers through the close-ups between Sergeant James and the Iraqi civilian, whereas Full Metal Jacket displays the brutality of the film's Marines. This major difference between the films exhibits the distinct socio-political and historical factors of the film's cultural context, since Full Metal Jacket indirectly addresses to the audience that the intervention of the United States in the Vietnam War led to civilians to be forced into a side, while The Hurt Locker depicts American intervention in Iraq as helpful to the population who have had their freedom restricted due to terrorist insurgents. The anti-war American 60s society is clearly represented with Full Metal Jacket through the constant death and violence. Post 9/11 shocked and outraged America is the contrary representation in the second film, for American society became supportive of war against terrorism, in which initial success was met. In conclusion, Full Metal Jacket and The Hurt Locker reveal the changes in the war genre as American views towards war have shifted, set forth by the 80s view of the Vietnam War and early 2000s America.